Grogu was hiding in a storage room when Darth Vader murdered his friends. He watched through a gap between crates as children he'd trained with for decades were cut down one by one. He saw the red lightsaber. He heard the screams, and then Vader turned toward his hiding spot. This is what happens if Grogu was actually inside the Jedi Temple during Order 66. We know Grogu survived that dark day. We know someone rescued him, but the details have always been murky, conveniently vague. What if the reason his memories are so fragmented, so traumatic, is because he wasn't just somewhere on Coruscant when the Purge happened? What if he was right there, in the heart of it all, watching the Jedi Order die in real time? What if those big innocent eyes witnessed Anakin Skywalker's first act as a Sith Lord? Everything changes with that one shift. His entire character, every choice he makes in The Mandalorian, every moment of hesitation and fear, suddenly carries exponentially more weight. Because this isn't just survivor's guilt. This is the guilt of someone who hid while his friends died. Someone who was too small, too scared, too powerless to stop a massacre happening right in front of him. Let's explore exactly how this would unfold, and why it makes Grogu's story infinitely more devastating. Before we dive into this alternate scenario, let's establish what we actually know from canon. Grogu was born around 41 years before the Battle of Yavin, which means he was already in his early 50s during the Clone Wars, though still very much a child by his species' standards. We know he was raised at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. We know he survived Order 66. And we know that someone, a figure we now understand to be Jedi Master Kelleran Beck, played by Ahmed Best, rescued him during the chaos. But the exact circumstances? Those remain frustratingly vague, shrouded in the kind of mystery that makes Star Wars fans theorize for years. What we see in The Mandalorian are fragments, glimpses of trauma that Grogu has clearly repressed. When he connects with Ahsoka Tano on Corvus, she senses his fear, his memories of the temple, the guilt and the loss. Later, when Luke begins training him, we see more evidence of deep psychological scars. This isn't just any survivor's guilt. This is the mark of someone who witnessed something truly horrific, something so terrible that his mind has locked it away in the deepest vaults of his consciousness. So let's unlock that vault. Let's explore what would have happened if Grogu was there, right in the heart of the temple, when everything went wrong. The day begins like any other. Grogu is in the youngling's training area, perhaps practicing with his lightsaber under the watchful eye of a Jedi instructor. Or maybe he's in one of the meditation chambers, those peaceful rooms where the Force feels especially strong. At 50 years old, Grogu would have been training for decades already, but his physical appearance, his childlike demeanor, would have kept him among the youngest students. The Jedi didn't fully understand his species, their incredibly slow-aging process, their unique connection to the Force. To them, Grogu was both a mystery and a blessing, a student who had more time than most to truly master the ways of the Force. The Clone Wars are raging across the galaxy, but here in the temple there's a sense of cautious optimism. The Separatists are on the run. General Grievous is dead. Obi-Wan Kenobi is hunting down the Separatist leaders on Utapau. Victory seems close, so tantalizingly close that you can almost taste it. The younglings can feel it too. Their instructors are less tense, smiling more, talking about what will happen when the war finally ends. Maybe they'll take more field trips to the lower levels. Maybe they'll visit other planets, see the galaxy beyond the war-torn regions. Hope is a dangerous thing when it's about to be shattered. Then it happens. The disturbance in the Force isn't subtle. It's a scream, a tsunami of death and betrayal that crashes through every Force-sensitive being in the temple. Grogu feels it before he understands it. His ears droop, his eyes widen, and that primal instinct for danger, the one that's kept his species alive for millennia, kicks in with full force. Something is wrong. Something is terribly, catastrophically wrong. The instructors feel it too. Some of them freeze, trying to comprehend what they're sensing. Others immediately move into action, their training overriding their shock. They begin herding younglings toward secure areas, toward the hidden passages that honeycomb the temple's foundations. But they're too late. The clones are already inside. The 501st Legion, led by the newly christened Darth Vader, storms through the main entrance with ruthless efficiency. These aren't the friendly soldiers who fought beside the Jedi for 3 years. These aren't the men who shared rations and stories, who respected the generals who led them. These are weapons, their inhibitor chips overriding free will, turning brothers in arms into executioners. The sound of blaster fire echoes through the halls. Each shot a death knell for the order that has stood for millennia. Grogu's instructor. Let's imagine it's a Rodian Jedi Knight named Teebo ignites his lightsaber. The green blade hums to life, casting strange shadows on the walls. He turns to the younglings, his voice steady despite the fear radiating from every pore. He tells them to run, to hide, to get to the lower levels where the emergency protocols will activate. Some of the older younglings grab the younger ones. A human girl, maybe 10 years old, scoops up a Twi'lek toddler. A teenage Zabrak tries to organize the group, his natural leadership qualities shining through even in crisis. And Grogu? Grogu stands frozen, his connection to the Force showing him things, terrible things. Flashes of future and present colliding in a way that his young mind can barely process. Teebo physically picks up Grogu, breaking his trance, and thrusts him toward the group. The Rodian's last words are simple but profound. He tells them that the Force will be with them, always. Then he turns to face the corridor, to buy them precious seconds with his life. The younglings run. They don't look back when they hear Teebo's lightsaber clash against blaster bolts. They don't look back when those sounds suddenly stop. They just run, their little feet pounding against the polished stone floors, their hearts hammering with terror they've never known before. The temple is a maze. This is something most people don't realize. The public areas, the grand halls and meditation chambers, those are just the surface. Beneath and behind them are service corridors, ancient passages, rooms that haven't been opened in centuries. The younglings know some of these paths. They've explored them during games, during the rare moments when their instructors looked the other way. Now those childish adventures become survival skills. The teenage Zabrak, his name is Kento, leads them down a narrow stairwell. The walls are closer here, the air staler. They can still hear the blaster fire, but it's muffled, distant, like a storm happening on another world. Grogu's mind is racing. His species has a natural affinity for the Force that even the Jedi find remarkable. Right now, that connection is both a blessing and a curse. He can sense the deaths, each one a star winking out in the cosmic force. Master Shak Ti struck down while meditating. Jocasta Nu, trying to protect the archives she's guarded for decades. Younglings, so many younglings, their lights extinguished before they ever had a chance to truly shine. The weight of it threatens to overwhelm him. His legs stop working. He simply sits down in the corridor, his large eyes brimming with tears, his three-fingered hands clutching at his robes. The human girl, her name is Lyra, doubles back. She's 12, old enough to understand the magnitude of what's happening, but young enough to still believe they might survive this. She kneels beside Grogu, speaking to him in that universal language of comfort that transcends species. She tells him they have to keep moving. She tells him they'll be okay. She's lying, and some part of him knows it. But the intent behind the lie is pure love, pure compassion. It's enough to get him moving again. He takes her hand, and they continue deeper into the temple's bowels. The group finds a storage room, one of hundreds scattered throughout the temple complex. It's filled with old training equipment, deactivated droids, containers of spare parts. Kento makes a decision. They'll hide here, wait for the attack to pass, wait for the Jedi Council to return and fix this nightmare. The others don't argue. Where else can they go? The temple is surrounded. The clones control every exit, so they hide, pushing themselves behind stacks of containers, making themselves as small as possible. Grogu, with his naturally tiny frame, squeezes into a space between two crates that a human child could never fit into. From here, through a small gap, he can see the door. He watches and waits. Time loses meaning in the dark. Minutes feel like hours. The sounds of battle continue above them, a constant reminder that their world is ending. Some of the younglings cry quietly. Others sit in shock, their minds unable to process the horror. Kento tries to keep them focused, asking them to meditate, to reach out through the Force and sense if help is coming. It's a distraction, a way to give them purpose, but it's also torture. Every time they reach out, they feel more deaths, more lights going out. The Jedi Order isn't just being attacked. It's being exterminated with systematic military precision. Then they hear footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy boots, moving with purpose. The younglings freeze, holding their breath, praying to the Force that whoever it is will pass by. The footsteps stop, right outside their door. There's a long moment of silence, so profound that Grogu can hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then the door opens. The figure silhouetted in the doorway is tall, robed, but something about him is wrong. The Force around him is twisted, corrupted, screaming with rage and pain and hate. It's Anakin Skywalker, but it's also not. This is something else, something dark that's wearing Anakin's face. The youngling's hiding spots are good, but not good enough to fool a Sith Lord. Vader, because that's what he is now, even if he hasn't fully accepted it, steps into the room. His eyes scan the space with predatory focus. He speaks, and his voice is still Anakin's voice, but hollowed out, emptied of warmth. He tells them to come out. He tells them he's here to help, to take them somewhere safe. It's a lie so transparent that even the youngest among them can feel it. Kento makes a decision. He stands, igniting a training lightsaber, its blue blade flickering uncertainly. It's a brave gesture, a futile gesture, but it's all he has. He tells the others to run. What happens next is brutal and quick. Vader doesn't even draw his lightsaber. He simply raises a hand, and Kento flies backward, his body slamming into the wall with bone-breaking force. The training saber clatters to the floor, its blade extinguishing. The other younglings scatter, abandoning their hiding spots in blind panic. Some make it to the door. Most don't. Vader moves through them like death incarnate, his lightsaber now drawn, its blade red as arterial blood. Lyra tries to shield a Rodian child with her own body. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters in the face of this darkness. Grogu remains hidden. Some instinct, some deep-seated survival mechanism keeps him absolutely still. He watches through the gap between crates as his friends die. He watches as Vader cuts them down with mechanical efficiency. No rage, no passion, just cold execution. The screams echo in the small room, bouncing off walls, drilling into Grogu's mind where they'll live forever. He wants to help. He wants to burst from his hiding spot and use the Force to push Vader away, to do something, anything. But he can't move. Fear has paralyzed him as surely as if he'd been frozen in carbonite. Then Vader stops. He turns, his gaze sweeping the room once more. He knows. Somehow, despite Grogu's stillness, despite his attempts to suppress his Force presence, Vader knows someone else is here. The Sith Lord begins walking toward the crates, each step deliberate, inevitable. Grogu's heart is hammering so hard he thinks it might burst. This is it. This is where his story ends. In a storage room, hiding behind boxes, murdered by a fallen hero. Vader's hand reaches toward the crates, beginning to push them aside with the Force. Grogu closes his eyes, unable to watch his own death approach. But then something happens. There's a disturbance, a new presence in the Force. Vader stops, his attention pulled away. Through the still open door, Grogu can hear voices, shouts, the sound of more blaster fire, but different this time. Whoever's shooting, they're not shooting at Jedi. Vader makes a noise, something between frustration and rage, and then he's moving, leaving the storage room, heading toward this new threat. The door slides shut behind him. Grogu is alone with the bodies of his friends, surrounded by silence except for his own ragged breathing. He doesn't know how long he stays there. It could be minutes, could be hours. His mind has retreated to somewhere safe, somewhere the horror can't reach him. He's aware of his body breathing, his heart beating, but it's like he's watching himself from a distance, detached, floating in the Force like a leaf on a stream. This is trauma manifesting in real time, a child's psyche fracturing under unbearable weight. When he finally moves, it's not a conscious decision. His body simply unfolds itself, crawling out from between the crates, stumbling toward the door on legs that don't want to support him. The corridor outside is empty but marked with signs of battle. Scorch marks on the walls, a clone trooper's helmet lying abandoned, a Jedi's lightsaber hilt crushed and broken. Grogu picks a direction at random and walks. He's no longer thinking about escape or survival. He's simply moving because staying still means being alone with what he's witnessed. The temple that was his home is unrecognizable now. Smoke drifts through the halls. Emergency lighting casts everything in red, making it look like the inside of some vast dying creature. Bodies lie where they fell, Jedi and clones alike, though the Jedi far outnumber their killers. He passes the Great Hall where he used to attend lectures about the Force, about the Jedi Code, about compassion and justice and the light. The statues of ancient masters look down at the carnage with stone eyes, unable to intervene, unable to save the order they helped build. He passes the quarters where he slept, the door now blasted open, the interior ransacked by clone troopers searching for survivors. His few possessions, a collection of small stones he'd gathered from different planets, a hollow pick of himself with his creche mates, are scattered and trampled. Nothing is sacred. Nothing has been spared. Grogu finds himself in the meditation garden, one of his favorite places in the entire temple. This is where he used to sit and watch the fountain, where the Master said the Force flowed most peacefully. The fountain is still running, water burbling over rocks, but the garden itself has been torn apart. Blaster fire has shredded the carefully tended plants. A Jedi Grogu recognizes, a Nautilon master who once taught him about aquatic meditation techniques, lies dead near the koi pond. The fish are still alive, swimming in circles, oblivious to the death of their caretaker. There's something about this, the contrast between the peaceful fish and the murdered master, that finally breaks through Grogu's shock. He sits down hard and he begins to cry. The sound of his crying is what saves him. It's what draws the attention of Kelleran Beck. Master Beck is a Jedi who served in the Clone Wars but was back at the temple for a briefing when Order 66 was executed. He's been fighting his way through the temple, trying to reach the younglings area, knowing that's where the most defenseless would be. He's wounded, a blaster burn on his shoulder, his robes torn and singed. But he's alive, and more importantly, he's still fighting. When he hears Grogu's cries, he follows the sound, his lightsaber ready, expecting a trap. What he finds instead is a tiny figure sobbing among the ruins of what was once beauty. Beck approaches carefully. He's seen too much today to assume anything is safe. But as he gets closer, recognition dawns. He knows this youngling, has seen him around the temple, always curious, always gentle despite the incredible force potential the Master sensed in him. The Jedi kneels beside Grogu, deactivating his lightsaber. He speaks softly, introducing himself, asking if Grogu is hurt. The child looks up at him with those enormous eyes that have seen far too much. And Beck understands. This one witnessed it. This one watched friends die. The knowledge settles in his stomach like a stone. He's going to have to carry that weight along with his own trauma. But there's no time for grief. The temple is still being purged. Clone troopers patrol every level, executing any Jedi they find, even the wounded, even those who surrender. Beck knows they have to leave, have to get off Coruscant entirely. But how? The temple is surrounded. Ships are being shot down if they try to leave. The Senate is nearby, but can they trust the politicians? Can they trust anyone? Beck makes a decision. He tells Grogu they're going to run, that they're going to get to the hangar, and they're going to steal a ship. It's a desperate plan, barely even a plan at all, but it's all they have. Grogu nods. He doesn't have the voice to agree, but he takes Beck's offered hand, and that's answer enough. Their journey through the temple is a nightmare. Every corridor could hide clone troopers. Every shadow could be a threat. Beck tries to take paths he knows are less traveled, service corridors and maintenance shafts, but even these aren't entirely safe. They pass other bodies, other fallen Jedi. Some of them Beck knew for years, fought beside during the Clone Wars, shared meals with in the temple refectory. Each one has a knife in his heart, but he can't stop. Stopping means death. Stopping means Grogu dies too, and Beck has decided, with the absolute certainty that comes from the Force, that this child must survive. He doesn't know why, doesn't question it, just knows it with the same certainty he knows the sun will rise. They encounter clone troopers twice. The first time, Beck manages to hide them behind a fallen pillar before the squad passes by. The second time, there's no hiding. 3 troopers round a corner and come face to face with them. There's a moment, a heartbeat, where everyone freezes. Then training takes over. The troopers raise their blasters. Beck ignites his lightsaber and pushes Grogu behind him. What follows is a blur of motion and energy. Beck deflects blaster bolts, redirecting them with precision. One trooper falls, then another. The third gets off a shot that comes within centimeters of Grogu's head before Beck cuts him down. The whole engagement lasts maybe 10 seconds, but it feels like a lifetime. In the aftermath, Beck is shaking. Not from fear, though there's plenty of that, but from the reality of what he's done. These were men he fought beside. Good soldiers, loyal to the Republic, and he just killed them. Grogu tugs on his robes, trying to get him moving again, and Beck realizes the child is comforting him. This youngling who just watched his friends die is worried about the adult. The role reversal is almost funny, in a dark, horrible way. Beck takes a deep breath, centers himself in the Force, and they continue toward the hangar. The hangar is chaos. Ships are taking off without clearance, some piloted by fleeing Jedi, others by temple staff who've realized staying means death. Clone troopers are everywhere, firing on anything that moves. Beck spots a small transport, a diplomatic vessel that was probably here for some Senate business. It's unguarded at the moment, the troopers focused on a larger ship that's attempting to launch. This is their chance. Beck runs, clutching Grogu against his chest, deflecting blaster bolts with his free hand. It's the most difficult thing he's ever done, protecting this child while fighting for their lives, but he manages it. They reach the transport's ramp. Beck practically throws Grogu inside, then follows, his lightsaber whirling as he backs up the ramp, keeping the troopers at bay. The ship's systems are already running. Someone tried to steal it earlier and left it powered up. Beck doesn't question this stroke of luck. He throws himself into the pilot's seat and punches the throttle. The transport lurches into the air, sluggish and complaining. Blaster fire rakes the hull. Alarms start screaming. Beck ignores all of it, focused on getting them out of the hangar before the troopers can organize a proper response. The transport shoots out into Coruscant's airspace, immediately joining the chaotic traffic patterns that always surround the temple. For a moment, they're just another ship in the endless stream. For a moment, they might actually make it. Then the alarm changes pitch. Something's locked onto them. A missile or a tracking system, Beck isn't sure which. He throws the transport into a dive, heading down into the lower levels of Coruscant, where the buildings are packed so tightly that larger ships can't follow. The transport isn't made for this kind of flying. It's designed for gentle diplomatic approaches to landing pads, not combat maneuvers through urban canyons. But Beck is a Jedi, his reflexes enhanced by the Force, his precognition giving him split-second warnings of obstacles. He threads the transport through gaps that should be impossible, under bridges, around support pillars, through the skeletal remains of ancient structures. Grogu has strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat, his small hands gripping the armrests. He's terrified but also fascinated. He's never seen flying like this, never experienced the raw edge of survival where one wrong move means death. Part of him, the part that's not frozen in trauma, is analyzing Beck's techniques, learning, storing information for a future he can't yet imagine. This is how his species learns, through observation and experience, absorbing knowledge that will sit dormant for years before suddenly becoming relevant. He's watching a master at work, and even in his fear, he's growing. They finally lose their pursuers somewhere in the industrial sector, landing the transport in an abandoned factory complex. The ship settles with a groan of stressed metal, and Beck allows himself to collapse against the controls. His shoulder is bleeding again, the wound from earlier reopened by the exertion. His hands are shaking. Grogu reaches out, placing one small hand on Beck's arm. The touch is gentle, questioning. Beck manages a smile, though there's no joy in it. He tells Grogu they made it. They're alive. For now, that's enough. But they can't stay here. Coruscant is a death trap for Jedi. The whole planet will be searched. Every level, every sector. The Empire, and yes, that's what it is now, will be thorough. Beck needs to get them off-world. Needs to find somewhere they can hide until he figures out what to do next. He checks the transport systems. They have fuel for maybe one more atmospheric flight and a single jump to hyperspace. After that, they'll be stranded. He pulls up the Navi computer, searching for nearby systems that might offer sanctuary. Nothing close is safe. All the major worlds will be under Imperial control within days if they aren't already. Then he remembers something. A planet he visited years ago, before the Clone Wars, when he was just a knight doing survey work for the temple. It's called Arvala 7, a backwater rock in the outer rim, barely inhabited, of no strategic value to anyone. There's a small community there, people who want nothing to do with the larger galaxy. It's not much, but it's somewhere to hide, somewhere to rest and plan their next move. Beck programs the coordinates. Before they leave, he uses the factory's facilities to send out an encrypted message on old Jedi channels, warning any survivors to stay hidden, to avoid the temple, to run and not look back. They take off again as night falls on Coruscant, the city planet's light stretching to every horizon. Grogu watches through the viewport, understanding that he may never see this place again. The temple, the only home he's ever known, is down there somewhere, burning. The family he had, his creche mates and instructors and the masters who guided him, most of them are dead. His old life is over. This is his new reality. Fugitive, survivor, the one who lived when others didn't. The weight of that settles onto his small shoulders, far too heavy for someone so young, but he bears it. What choice does he have? The jump to hyperspace is rough. The transport wasn't meant for this kind of emergency launch, and its hyperdrive complains every parsec of the way. But it holds together. carrying them away from the core worlds, away from the Empire's heart, toward the lawless outer rim where authority is scarce and questions are rarely asked. Beck spends the journey tending to his wound and checking on Grogu. The child has gone quiet, not speaking, not even cooing the way he usually does. Beck recognizes the signs of shock, of a mind trying to process the unprocessable. He does what he can, keeping Grogu warm, making sure he eats, talking to him even when there's no response. During the journey, Grogu sleeps. And when he sleeps, he dreams. But these aren't normal dreams. The Force is showing him things, fragments of a possible future, warnings and promises and paths not yet taken. He sees himself older, stronger, standing with a warrior in gleaming armor. He sees a weapon, a legacy of a fallen order, placed in hands too small to properly wield it. He sees darkness and light in eternal struggle, and himself caught between them, pulled in directions he doesn't understand. When he wakes, he remembers none of this consciously. But it's there, buried deep, seeds planted that will sprout years later. They arrive at Arvala 7. The planet is as Beck remembered, desolate and harsh, its surface scoured by winds and baked by a merciless sun. The community he recalled is still there, a huddle of moisture farmers and prospectors eking out a living in the hostile environment. Beck lands the transport at the settlement's edge, unsure of their reception. He doesn't have to wonder long. The settlers, hardened by years of survival on this unforgiving rock, size up the newcomers quickly. A Jedi and a child, both wounded in different ways, running from something. The settlers don't ask questions. They've all come here to escape something. They understand. One of the settlers, a Twi'lek woman named Sue, offers them shelter in her moisture farm. She has children of her own and immediately takes to Grogu, coaxing him to eat, finding him clean clothes, speaking to him in that universal language of mothers that transcends species. Beck is grateful beyond words. For the first time since Order 66, he allows himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll survive this. He spends his days helping the settlers with repairs and defense, using his Jedi abilities discreetly. At night, he meditates, reaching out through the Force for other survivors, feeling the vastness of the loss but also tiny sparks of hope scattered across the galaxy. Grogu slowly begins to recover, at least outwardly. He plays with Sue's children, explores the rocky landscape around the farm, practices small uses of the Force when he thinks no one is watching. But Beck can see the change in him. The child who was always curious and gentle now has shadows in his eyes. He startles at loud noises. He clings to familiar people with a desperation that speaks of deep abandonment fears. At night, Beck can hear him crying softly, working through trauma that will take years, maybe decades, to fully process. The Jedi knows he needs to do more, needs to help Grogu heal, but he doesn't know how. This isn't something the Temple taught. Months pass. The Empire consolidates its power. News trickles out to even this remote world. Stories of Jedi hunted down and killed, of the Temple's ruins being converted into the Emperor's palace, of Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, leading purges across the galaxy. Each story is a fresh wound for Beck, but he's learning to live with the pain, to carry it as part of himself rather than letting it consume him. He teaches Grogu, when the child seems ready, small lessons about the Force, about meditation, about staying connected to the light even when darkness surrounds you. These lessons are different from the Temple's structured training. These are lessons born of survival, of resistance, of refusing to let the Empire win by destroying who you are. Then one day, a ship lands at the settlement. It's not Imperial, but it's not friendly either. Bounty hunters, a group of Trandoshans looking for easy prey. They've heard rumors of a Jedi hiding on Arvala 7, and Jedi, even rumors of Jedi, are worth credits to the Empire. Beck knows they're here for him. He makes a decision. He tells Sue to keep Grogu safe, to hide him. He tells the child that he has to leave, that staying means danger for everyone. Grogu doesn't understand. He clings to Beck's robes, pleading in his own way for the Jedi not to go. But Beck gently pries those small fingers loose. He tells Grogu to be strong, to trust in the Force, to never forget what he's learned. Beck leads the bounty hunters away from the settlement, deeper into the wasteland. He's not planning to surrender. He's planning to make sure that if the Empire wants him dead, they'll have to work for it. The Trandoshans track him for hours, thinking they're hunting him, not realizing until too late that they're the ones being hunted. Beck picks them off one by one, using the terrain, using the Force, using every trick he learned during the Clone Wars. The last one he lets live long enough to send a message. If the Empire wants Jedi, they'll find only ghosts and legends. Then he disappears into the wilderness, never to return to the settlement. Sue keeps Grogu for a while after that. She's a kind woman with a good heart, but she's also practical. A Force-sensitive child is a magnet for the wrong kind of attention. When another group of bounty hunters shows up, asking questions about the Jedi, she makes the hardest decision of her life. She contacts an old friend, someone who deals in hiding people who need to disappear. Grogu is passed along a chain of protectors, each keeping him for a time before moving him on. It's a network of good people, resistors in their own quiet way, refusing to let the Empire have everything. For years, Grogu moves through the Outer Rim, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots, never forgetting the faces of those who died in the temple. But this story, the one where Grogu was actually present at the temple during Order 66, changes him in ways that ripple forward through his life. When he's eventually found by Din Djarin the Mandalorian, he's carrying different scars. He's more fearful, more hesitant to trust, but he's also more determined, more aware of how precious life is, how quickly it can be taken away. The memories he's repressed, the things he saw in that storage room, in the meditation garden, in the burning hallways of the temple, those memories shape every decision he makes. When Luke Skywalker begins training him, Grogu's experience gives him a unique perspective. He's not just a student learning about an ancient order. He's a survivor teaching a new generation about the mistakes of the past. He can tell Luke things that no one else can, about the hubris of the old order, about the dangers of attachment, yes, but also the dangers of detachment, of putting principles above people. The nightmares still come, of course. Some nights, Grogu wakes screaming, seeing Vader's red blade, hearing the screams of his friends. But Luke is patient, helping him work through the trauma, teaching him that acknowledging pain is not the same as giving in to it. The question of whether Grogu and Vader actually crossed paths in the temple adds another layer to his character. If they did, if Vader looked directly at him and then left him alive, what does that mean? Was there some remnant of Anakin, some tiny piece of the hero that couldn't bring itself to kill one more child? Or was it simply that Vader was distracted, called away before he could finish? Grogu will never know for sure, but the possibility haunts him, the idea that the monster who killed his friends might have also saved him, however inadvertently. It complicates his feelings about Vader, about Anakin, about redemption and forgiveness in ways he'll spend his entire long life trying to understand. When Grogu eventually returns to Coruscant, decades later when the New Republic has been established and the Empire is just a dark memory, he visits the site where the Jedi Temple once stood. It's been rebuilt into something else now, a monument to the fallen, a place of remembrance rather than training. He walks through the halls, or where the halls used to be, and the memories flood back. He sees the ghosts of his past, the younglings running and laughing, the masters teaching and guiding, the temple as it was before the darkness came. He stands in what was the meditation garden, now restored but different, and he cries. Not from grief, though there's still grief, but from release. He's carried this weight for so long, and now, finally, he can begin to set it down. The experience of surviving the temple purge, of seeing Order 66 from the inside, gives Grogu a mission for the rest of his life. He becomes a keeper of memory, ensuring that future generations understand what was lost, what the cost of the Empire was. He works with historians, with the New Republic's education system, making sure the stories of the fallen are told. He finds the families of the younglings who died, bringing them closure, telling them their children were brave, were loved, were not forgotten. This brings us to one of the most profound implications of Grogu being present at the temple during Order 66. His entire relationship with attachment, with connection, with letting people into his life, would be fundamentally different. The Jedi Order taught non-attachment as a core principle, believing that attachment led to fear, fear to anger, anger to hate, and hate to suffering. But Grogu would have learned a different lesson that day. He would have learned that detachment, the kind of emotional distance the Jedi prided themselves on, doesn't protect you from loss. It just means you suffer alone. When Grogu bonds with Din Djarin, the Mandalorian who becomes his father in all but blood, he's making a conscious choice that goes against his Jedi training. He's choosing attachment, choosing to love someone despite knowing that love means vulnerability, means the potential for devastating loss. But having witnessed the alternative, having seen what happened when the Jedi put their principles above their connections to the living force, to the people around them, Grogu understands that attachment isn't the enemy. Fear of attachment is. The refusal to acknowledge that love and connection are part of what makes life worth living. That's the real danger. Think about the moment in the series when Grogu has to choose between staying with Luke to complete his training or returning to Din. In our scenario, where Grogu was present at the temple during its fall, this choice carries even more weight. He's not just choosing between two paths, between the Jedi way and the Mandalorian way. He's choosing between the system that failed to protect the people he loved and a new possibility, a way of being that honors both the Force and the bonds between living beings. When he chooses to return to Din, he's not abandoning the Jedi legacy. He's evolving it, taking the lessons of the past and creating something new. The psychological impact of witnessing Order 66 firsthand cannot be overstated. Grogu would carry survivor's guilt that would manifest in complex ways throughout his life. Every time he uses the Force, every time he accomplishes something, there would be a part of him asking why he survived when so many others, more talented, more deserving, didn't. Kento, the Zabrak teenager who stood up to Vader with nothing but a training saber and courage. Lyra, the human girl who died trying to protect a younger child. Master Tebow, who bought them precious seconds with his life. All of them gone while Grogu lived. The randomness of survival, the arbitrary nature of who lives and who dies in moments of chaos, would haunt him. This guilt would drive him to be better, to be worthy of his survival. But it would also create a kind of recklessness, a willingness to put himself in danger to protect others that goes beyond normal Jedi self-sacrifice. When Grogu throws himself in front of Din to shield him from danger, when he uses his powers to the point of exhaustion to save someone, he's not just being heroic. He's trying to balance cosmic scales that can never truly be balanced. He's trying to earn his survival through the survival of others. It's noble and tragic at the same time, and it makes him a far more complex character than simply being a cute child with Force powers. Let's also consider how being at the temple during Order 66 would affect Grogu's view of clone troopers and, by extension, his relationship with any former Imperial soldiers he might encounter. The clones who executed Order 66 weren't acting of their own free will. The inhibitor chips removed their agency, turned them into biological droids following programming. But to a traumatized youngling watching his friends die, that distinction wouldn't matter. Clone trooper armor, that white plastoid that once represented protection and security, would become a symbol of betrayal and death. This could create interesting tension in Grogu's later life. When he encounters someone like Captain Rex, who removed his chip and fought against the Empire, or other clones who resisted their programming, he would have to reconcile his trauma with the reality that not all clones were willing participants in the genocide. It's a lesson in nuance, in understanding that people can be both victims and perpetrators, that circumstances and systems can force good people to do terrible things. For someone of Grogu's species, with their extended lifespan and long memory, learning to forgive, or at least to understand, would be a journey measured in decades. Now let's explore an even darker possibility within this scenario. What if Grogu's presence at the temple during Order 66 was known to the Empire? What if, in our alternate timeline, Vader realized he'd left a witness, a survivor who could potentially testify to what happened? The Empire's propaganda machine worked hard to paint the Jedi as traitors who tried to overthrow the Republic. Having a Jedi survivor, especially one as young and sympathetic as Grogu, who could contradict that narrative, would be a threat to Imperial legitimacy. This would turn Grogu into one of the most wanted beings in the galaxy. Not just because he's Force-sensitive, not just because Palpatine might want to corrupt him to the dark side or study his species' unique Force abilities, but because he's living proof that the Empire's foundation story is a lie. Imagine the resources that would be deployed to find him, to silence him. Inquisitors hunting him across the Outer Rim, bounty hunters with descriptions and last known locations, Imperial intelligence analyzing every report of Force activity, looking for his signature in the Force. This would explain so much about why Grogu ends up so isolated, so hidden. It's not just that the Jedi are being hunted, it's that he specifically is being hunted, that there are files in Imperial databases with his name, his image, his last known location. Everyone who helps him, everyone who shelters him, is putting themselves at tremendous risk. The network of protectors who move him from place to place isn't just being kind. They're participating in active resistance against the Empire, hiding a witness to its greatest crime. Some of them would be caught, interrogated, killed for their defiance. Grogu would know this. Every new protector who takes him in, he'd understand they might die because of him. More guilt, more weight for such small shoulders to carry. But there's also a thread of hope in this darkness. Because Grogu survives, because he makes it through decades of Imperial pursuit, he becomes a symbol. Not publicly, not in a way that most people would recognize, but within the network of resistors, of good people who refuse to bow to the Empire. He becomes a legend, the child who lived, the witness who couldn't be silenced. Stories about him would spread through the Rebel Alliance, through the underground networks, through the communities that help people escape Imperial persecution. He'd be proof that the Empire, for all its power, can't control everything. That resistance, even passive resistance, even just the act of survival, matters. Let's circle back to the immediate aftermath and explore another angle. What if Grogu wasn't completely alone when Vader's presence drove him into hiding? What if one other youngling survived alongside him? Let's imagine a scenario where a young Nautolan, a child of the same species as Kit Fisto, also managed to hide in that storage room. We'll call her Vera. She and Grogu huddle together in the darkness after Vader leaves. Two terrified children who've just watched their entire world collapse. The dynamic between them would be fascinating. Vera might be a year or two older, physically and mentally more mature. But Grogu has decades more life experience, more training, more understanding of the Force. They'd balance each other out. Vera's quick thinking and adaptability complementing Grogu's deep Force connection and intuition. When Kelleran Beck finds them, he'd have two younglings to protect, two lives to save. The logistics would be harder, the risks greater, but the emotional support they could provide each other would be invaluable. Having Vera with him would change Grogu's trajectory significantly. He wouldn't be quite so alone with his trauma. They'd share the nightmares, the memories, the grief. They'd have someone who truly understands, not just intellectually but viscerally, what it was like to be there. In quiet moments, they'd talk about their friends, keeping their memories alive. Lyra's laugh. Kento's determination. The way Master Tebow would adjust his goggles when he was thinking. These small details, these human, or in this case sentient moments, would be preserved because they had each other to remember with. But it would also complicate things. Two Force-sensitive children are twice as noticeable as one, twice as dangerous to hide. And there would be disagreements, conflicts born from different processing of trauma, different ideas about what they should do with their survival. Maybe Vera wants to fight, to join the rebellion early, to actively resist the Empire. Maybe Grogu, having seen the consequences of violence, wants to hide, to survive, to wait for a better time. These tensions would be natural and would force both of them to articulate their values, to understand why they feel the way they do. Eventually, their paths might diverge. Maybe when they're teenagers, equivalently speaking, they decide they're putting each other at too much risk by staying together. Maybe Vera does join the rebellion, becomes a spy or a commando, using her Jedi training in the fight against the Empire. Maybe Grogu continues hiding, moving from place to place, but they stay in contact through secret channels, checking in on each other, providing support across the vastness of space. And maybe, years later after the Empire has fallen, they reunite. Two of the last witnesses to the Temple's fall, older, scarred, but still standing. Still refusing to let the Empire win by destroying who they are. This alternate scenario with Vera also raises questions about other potential survivors. We know from canon that some Jedi survived Order 66. Obi-Wan, Yoda, Ahsoka, Kanan, Cal Kestis, and others managed to escape the initial purge. But what about younglings specifically? In our scenario where Grogu was at the temple, were there others in different parts of the massive complex who also managed to hide, to survive those first terrible hours? The temple was enormous, a city unto itself. It's not impossible that small pockets of younglings, aided by quick-thinking Padawans or knights, found ways to survive until they could be evacuated. Imagine a network of survivors, scattered across the galaxy, most of them not even knowing the others exist. Grogu might be one of dozens, each carrying their own trauma, their own survivor's guilt, their own determination to honor the fallen. Some would try to rebuild, to keep the Jedi traditions alive in secret. Others would reject the Jedi path entirely, viewing it as a failed system that led to genocide. Still others would try to find a middle way, keeping some traditions while adapting, evolving, creating something new. Grogu, having witnessed the fall from the inside, having seen both the Jedi at their best and the moment of their destruction, would be uniquely positioned to understand all these perspectives. Now let's explore the technological and political aspects of this scenario. The Jedi Temple had security systems, surveillance cameras, data archives. When the 501st Legion stormed the temple, when Vader led them in his first act as a Sith Lord, all of that was potentially recorded. In our scenario, there might be footage of the massacre, files hidden in the temple's deep archives that the Empire never found or couldn't completely erase. Grogu, as a survivor, might know about these archives. He might know where backup systems were, how to access them, what they contained. This knowledge would make him incredibly dangerous to the Empire and incredibly valuable to the rebellion. Proof of what really happened at the temple, visual evidence of Vader leading clone troopers to murder children, would be devastating to Imperial propaganda. It would validate the rebellion's claims, provide concrete reasons for systems to defect, turn public opinion in ways that even military victories couldn't. The Empire would do anything to prevent this information from getting out. And the rebellion, once they learned Grogu had this knowledge, would do almost anything to obtain it. But accessing those archives would require returning to Coruscant, to the ruins of the temple that have been converted into the Emperor's palace. It would be a suicide mission, walking into the heart of darkness to retrieve proof of that darkness's origins. Grogu would have to weigh the value of the information against the risk, not just to himself, but to anyone who helped him. And he'd have to confront his own demons, literally returning to the site of his worst trauma, walking through halls where his friends died, seeing what the Empire has done to his home. The psychological toll would be immense. Let's imagine this mission taking place perhaps during the height of the rebellion, when they're desperate for anything that might turn the tide. Grogu, now much older but still carrying the weight of that terrible day, agrees to guide a small team into the Imperial Palace. The team would need to be elite. Maybe it includes someone like Cassian Andor, a rebel intelligence operative willing to do what's necessary. Maybe a former Imperial who knows the palace layout. Maybe even Ahsoka, who has her own history with the temple and her own need for closure. The infiltration would be tense, every corridor a reminder of what was lost. Grogu would lead them through service passages he remembers from his childhood, paths that hopefully haven't been altered too much by the Imperial renovations. They'd have to avoid patrols, slice through security systems, move through a building full of some of the deadliest beings in the galaxy. And all the while, Grogu would be fighting his own mind, the memories threatening to overwhelm him, the ghosts of the past calling out from every shadow. But they'd also find something unexpected in the archives. Personal logs from Jedi Masters recorded in the days and hours before Order 66. Messages to loved ones they knew they'd never see again. Last testaments from those who sensed something terrible was coming but couldn't stop it. Jocasta Nu, the chief librarian, recorded a message specifically for any survivors, telling them to remember, to learn from the Order's mistakes, to be better than they were. It's a gut punch, hearing these voices from beyond the grave, but it's also a gift. Proof that the Jedi, for all their flaws, loved and hoped and believed in something better. The team would extract the data, but getting out would be even harder than getting in. Because by now, the intrusion has been detected. Imperial security is converging on their location. And worst of all, Vader himself is in the palace. He senses something, a disturbance in the Force that's familiar, achingly familiar. A presence he remembers from that terrible day. A small Force signature he thought he'd killed or at least silenced forever. Vader begins hunting through his own palace, seeking the intruder who dares to disturb the tomb he's made of his past. The confrontation, if it happens, would be catastrophic for Grogu. Coming face to face with the being who killed his friends, who destroyed his home, who represents everything he's spent his life running from, would break open every carefully constructed defense mechanism. But it would also be clarifying. Because seeing Vader now, decades later, with adult eyes and adult understanding, Grogu would recognize something he couldn't as a child. This monster is in pain. This is what the dark side does. It doesn't make you powerful and free. It makes you a slave to your worst impulses, trapped in a prison of your own making, unable to escape the consequences of your choices. Maybe they escape. Maybe someone in the team sacrifices themselves to buy Grogu and the data time to get away. Maybe they make it back to the rebellion with proof that changes the course of the war. Or maybe they're caught and the data is destroyed, and all they have left is their testimony, which is still valuable but not the smoking gun they hoped for. Either way, Grogu would have faced his past, would have walked back into the nightmare and emerged on the other side. It wouldn't heal him, not completely. Some wounds never fully heal, but it would give him a sense of closure, a feeling that he's done something to honor those who died, that their deaths weren't meaningless. This brings us to another crucial aspect of Grogu being present during Order 66. His understanding of the Force itself would be fundamentally shaped by that experience. The Jedi taught that the Force had a light side and a dark side, that balance meant the triumph of light over darkness. But Grogu witnessed the moment when that philosophy failed catastrophically. He saw the light extinguished by the dark in a single coordinated strike. So what does balance actually mean? Is it about defeating darkness? Or is it about understanding that light and dark are both part of the natural cycle, that trying to eliminate one entirely is what leads to disaster? These are the questions that would occupy Grogu's thoughts during long periods of meditation, during the quiet moments between running and hiding. He'd revisit Jedi teachings he learned as a child, analyzing them with the perspective of trauma and survival. The concept of letting go, for instance. The Jedi said you must let go of attachments, let go of fear, let go of anger. But Grogu would argue, perhaps only to himself, that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending things didn't matter. You can acknowledge pain, can honor what was lost, and still move forward. That's real letting go, not the emotional suppression the Jedi sometimes practiced. His views on the dark side would be nuanced too. He witnessed the dark side's capacity for destruction firsthand. He knows what unchecked darkness leads to. But he'd also understand that darkness exists, that pretending it doesn't, that trying to simply avoid it rather than understanding it is what made the Jedi vulnerable. When he eventually trains with Luke or trains others himself, he'd emphasize awareness of the dark side, teaching students to recognize its whispers, to understand its seductions, rather than simply forbidding all negative emotions. Fear, anger, pain, these are natural responses to living. The question isn't whether you feel them, but what you do with them. This philosophical evolution would make Grogu a bridge between the old Jedi Order and whatever comes next. He carries the traditions, the forms, the techniques developed over millennia, but he also carries the knowledge of why those traditions failed, where the blind spots were, what needs to change. When Luke struggles with the question of how to rebuild the Jedi Order without repeating the mistakes of the past, Grogu's experience, his witness testimony to both the Order's greatness and its fall, would be invaluable. He's living proof that you can honor tradition while still adapting, still growing, still learning from catastrophic failure. Let's also consider the smaller, more personal ways being at the temple during Order 66 would affect Grogu. His relationship with food, for instance. In the chaos of that day, in the hours and days that followed, food would have been scarce, uncertain. The youngling who always had 3 meals a day in the temple cafeteria would suddenly be starving, not knowing when his next meal would come. This would create a lasting impact. Even years later, even when he's safe and well-fed, Grogu would have a tendency to hoard food, to eat quickly as if someone might take it away, to always be aware of where his next meal is coming from. It's a small thing, but these small traumas add up, creating behavioral patterns that persist long after the danger has passed. Sleep would be another issue. The temple had structured rest periods, quiet dormitories where younglings slept safely under the watch of Jedi guardians. After Order 66, sleep becomes dangerous. You're vulnerable when you sleep. You can't run, can't fight, can't sense danger approaching until it's too late. Grogu would develop chronic insomnia, his brain refusing to fully rest because rest equals death in his traumatized mind. When he does sleep, it's fitfully, constantly waking at small noises, checking his surroundings, making sure he's still safe. This exhaustion would compound other issues, making it harder to think clearly, to control his emotions, to use the Force with precision. And then there's touch. The Jedi weren't necessarily touch-averse, but they emphasized a certain physical and emotional distance. After Order 66, after being held by Kelleran Beck as they fled, after being passed from protector to protector, Grogu would have contradictory feelings about physical contact. Part of him would crave it, would need that reassurance that someone is there, that he's not alone. But another part would flinch away, afraid that getting close means losing someone else, means more pain when they inevitably leave or die. This tension would make his relationship with Din so powerful, because Din, through his actions, if not his words, teaches Grogu that it's okay to need someone, that attachment isn't weakness, that love is worth the risk of loss. Music would take on new meaning too. Perhaps there was music playing in the temple that day, some hologram performance in one of the common areas, cheerful and oblivious to the approaching darkness. Now that music, or anything that sounds like it, would be a trigger, instantly transporting Grogu back to that moment when everything changed. Or perhaps it's the opposite. Perhaps in the months and years after, music becomes a lifeline, something beautiful that proves the darkness didn't destroy everything, that art and joy and creation still exist. Grogu might develop a deep appreciation for music, seeking it out, finding comfort in melodies that have nothing to do with the Force or fighting or survival, just pure expression of emotion through sound. These details, these small human or sentient moments of trauma and healing, are what would make Grogu's story so resonant. Because yes, he's connected to the grand mythology of Star Wars, the rise and fall of the Jedi, the eternal struggle between light and dark. But he's also just someone trying to survive, trying to heal, trying to find meaning in senseless tragedy. That's something anyone can relate to, regardless of whether they know anything about the Force or the Star Wars universe. Trauma is universal. The struggle to overcome it, to not let it define you, to build a life worth living despite the scars, that's a story that transcends fiction. Now, as we bring this exploration toward its conclusion, let's consider the ultimate question. What does it mean that Grogu survived? Not just practically, not just in terms of plot consequences, but philosophically, spiritually. What does his survival represent? In a galaxy where the Empire seemed all-powerful, where the Jedi were annihilated, where darkness reigned for decades, Grogu's continued existence is an act of defiance. He's living proof that the Empire failed. They tried to erase the Jedi from history, tried to kill every last one, tried to make it so that no one would remember what the galaxy lost. But they missed one. They left a witness, and that witness carries forward the memory, the traditions, the hope that the Jedi represented. But more than that, Grogu represents resilience, the capacity of living beings to endure unimaginable horror and still choose life, still choose compassion, still choose to help others even when they've been hurt so badly themselves. He could have let the trauma break him, could have become bitter and cruel, could have decided that since the universe is meaningless and cruel, he might as well be cruel too. But he doesn't. Instead, he becomes gentle. He helps people. He protects the weak. He lives openly and without reservation, despite knowing what loss feels like. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing anyone can do. His survival also represents chance, randomness, the terrifying reality that sometimes there is no grand plan, no Force guiding events toward some predetermined end. Maybe he survived because he was small enough to hide where others couldn't. Maybe because Vader was distracted at the crucial moment. Maybe because Keller and Beck happened to be in the right place at the right time. There's no deep meaning to it, no reason why he deserved to live while others died. And accepting that, living with that knowledge, is part of what makes him heroic, because he doesn't waste his survival. He doesn't squander the gift of continued existence that was, in some sense, randomly bestowed upon him. He uses it. He makes it matter. In the end, whether Grogu was actually at the Jedi Temple during Order 66 or was rescued from another location doesn't change his core character. He's still the same being, still has the same essential qualities that make him who he is. But being there, witnessing it firsthand, adds layers of complexity, adds weight to his choices, adds resonance to his journey. It transforms him from a survivor of a historical event into a primary source, a witness whose testimony matters, whose memories shape how future generations understand what was lost and what must be preserved. So what if Grogu was at the Jedi Temple during Order 66? Then he would be a living bridge between past and future, carrying the weight of witnessed atrocity and the hope of recovery, bearing scars that never fully heal, but also a determination that never fully breaks. He would be exactly what the galaxy needed, not because he's powerful, though he is, but because he's proof that even in the darkest moments, even when all seems lost, survival is possible, healing is possible, and light can return.